legacy systems are too expensive to run.
I'm seeing that happening also,
really?
with the clients we work with.
Oh, wow.
Like everybody wants to secure the data and go more like in-house.
I think there's a lot of speculation today, obviously Bitcoin and like the future of blockchain,
Right.
and I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. A goal for all of us to make sure that we're providing products and services that not only wow the users and change the landscape, but also have integrity. I think that.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to the Curiosity Code podcast. I'm Alex, your host and CEO of Product Era, and we got a great guest with us today. It's Alison Rooney. Alison been building partnerships in the world of financial tech for over 15 years, from working with huge names like Google and Accenture to helping exciting new startups find their place. She's a specialist in digital transformation, advisory, sales, and forging powerful new business alliances. So basically, she knows how to make things happen in the complex world of finance. So right now she's at Google, building the amazing network of startups that are all moving their work to the cloud. Alison, it's great to have you here. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Same, Alex. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for the great introduction. I really appreciate it.
All right, let's start with what's happening at Google. You building a startup ecosystem there. Can you paint like a picture so the audience understands what this ecosystem is and what kind of startups are involved there? Yeah,
definitely. So I guess I'll give you a little context on what that means. And obviously people use that word ecosystem a lot when they're talking about it. For the large cloud providers, the ecosystem is really about two things. One is about innovating with the financial technology firm. So having them not only from an infrastructure perspective running on the cloud of choice, but also obviously leveraging everything AI related and building all those services into that ultimate product. So when you obviously, in some cases with this ecosystem, you meet a potential independent service vendor, an ISV, that already runs on your cloud. Sometimes you meet those that run on other clouds or multiple clouds. And I think the real kind of opportunity is getting that innovation and driving that innovation with that ISV. The other part of it is really how do we serve our end customer, right? At the end of the day, the important part of the ecosystem is who are we trying to serve, from high frequency trading to the buy side, the sell side, big global banks. Obviously they have different needs, different ways that they look at fintechs. And are we able to really build an ecosystem where those providers can access the technology they need to build for their ultimate customers?
Right. What are the key goals for Google in that ecosystem?
Well, certainly a lot of it has to do with meeting that customer demand. So as Google continues to evolve and have a larger presence in financial services globally, their focus has been certainly in North America around the exchange space. So the Chicago Mercantile, or the CME, signed a very large, $1 billion deal with Google to migrate its entire on-premise environment onto Google Cloud. There's also a number of other exchanges globally that have also agreed and want to work with Google, both from a cloud perspective and from the perspective of leveraging Gemini and the other AI services that Google has. And then there's also, all the global financial institutions that use Google and its services, across, a range of products.
I could imagine that throughout that exercise, you've integrated those cloud-based fintech solutions with sometimes old, obsolete, or legacy financial services systems. Can you share key challenges that you faced throughout the process, and maybe some of the exciting results that you've achieved?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as you mentioned, one of the biggest challenges is that there's a lot of risk and change. And obviously in financial institutions, they are adverse to that kind of risk, particularly when it comes to digital transformation. I would say that looking at the legacy systems and trying to quote unquote tweak them had been sort of the normal course. I think there's a future now when many of the financial institutions are saying these legacy systems are too expensive to run. It's difficult to maintain the mainframe and to find developers who know COBOL and the way it was built, 25 years ago.
Right.
And they're not getting to take advantage of all the new technology that's evolving, whether it's blockchain or agentic AI and all the different things that are evolving. They're not getting to take advantage because the legacy environment, as you mentioned, doesn't really adapt and it doesn't allow you to kind of bolt something onto it. So I think there's a real review now happening in a lot of global financial institutions about the next generation and what that looks like to them and whether or not they're looking at kind of creating a whole new kind of next generation environment, or if you will, a consortium of providers, as opposed to relying on one or two large systems to meet their needs.
Any particular cases you can share that would highlight, that kind of integration?
Well, I mean, certainly a lot of the sort of the top of the game is the high frequency traders. They're very adept. I'd say that they're certainly a technology company unto themselves, and many of the big names that you've probably heard of have been very successful at creating modular approaches to their trading, really taking advantage of opportunities to create new ways to leverage AI and machine learning, which obviously they've been doing for a long time.
Right.
New trading systems that they're building bespoke by asset class, new data and analytics tools that they're using, as well as any kinds of compliance tools and alerting and monitoring, things like that. And there's several of the HFTs and family offices that are very well known that are trying to use a lot of sentiment analysis to kind of predict some of the, whether or not it's front running a trade or it's any kind of way that they can avoid any kind of rogue action because of not only the regulatory landscape might be changing going forward in the current administration, but the reality is it's adverse impact to the organization when there's any kind of rogue trading or anything that kind of goes out of the norm, and that impacts their liquidity, impacts their ability to engage with customers. So I'm seeing a lot of, sort of testing in those areas, certainly by those really sort of, I would say, kind of frontier organizations. And then I think even the big financial institutions are deciding that the legacy platforms are no longer serving them. So if you're looking at a big global financial institution that might be looking at taking a legacy platform and removing it, maybe building something from scratch, because the components are all available. It just requires obviously the knowledge of the trading platform and kind of how to build that, but kind of using all those components from an ecosystem to build something and build that ecosystem almost bespoke because all those components exist now, digitally native, cloud native. So the ones that have been really successful at doing that, I think, are the digital assets companies. They've been really on the front foot when it comes to building digital native applications and really embracing them and really understanding how cloud and trading work and really trying to optimize that.
What about smaller companies, like startup size? Have you seen cases that excited you in that ecosystem that were able to challenge the conventional players in the market?
That's a good question. I think certainly, in core banking that's been happening for some time. I think that area has obviously had explosive growth, and certainly with in the UK and in a lot of places in EMEA, I think the neobanks have been very successful at building that way. I think in sort of the core capital markets, and I'll distinguish between capital markets and sort of wealth management. I also think in wealth management there's been a lot of disruption in that area because that's also another ecosystem that's very fragmented. There's so many different kinds of players. Most of the large institutions, both in North America, Canada, in EMEA, have kind of created these almost kind of, if you will, like a Frankenstein system that onboards and and it doesn't give any of the consumers the information they're looking for. So it's not a personalized wealth management experience. There's a lot around that, the quote unquote robo-advisor, which I think has, at best mixed results. And I think in terms of pure trading, I would look at some, like a Bullish, which is it doesn't run here in North America, but as a global player, they're very sophisticated about, building sort of the next generation of cloud, and Coinbase as well.
I have a note here. So you have expertise, and it's from your LinkedIn page, obviously, in digital transformation, advisory, sales, and new business alliances, right? So that's your pretty much key expertise.
Yes.
Let's talk about successful go-to-market strategy for cloud-based FinTech ecosystem. How can the strategy can be developed so that it caters evolving buying habits in financial institutions as they move away from a single applications architecture?
So yeah, I think that question is really important, because I spend most of my time talking to founders, and maybe I'll give a little bit of context on why. So there's obviously lots of legacy players that have quote unquote certified their application on a cloud.
Yeah.
However, because in part that's kind of not where the whole industry is moving in the certification of an application, I really believe the future is creating a consortium of these kind of best-in-class fintechs, data providers, compliance, trading, low latency. I mean, there's this kind of a vast ecosystem there. And I believe it's going to be a consortium approach to how that gets solved for many of these institutions. In speaking to founders, I think the biggest challenge is really understanding how, from a financial technology perspective, how to work with the cloud providers, because the cloud providers are certainly, both Microsoft and AWS started very early on, and now Snowflake as well, with a marketplace approach. And what does that mean? That most of the services are purchased through that marketplace that are enabled to run on our cloud. The challenge there is that most fintechs are not sort of structured that way. And it's very difficult initially to kind of think about not just running 100% on the cloud, but having a customer or a client purchase sort of as a developer would purchase code, because that's the way it's really set up as a SaaS application. So I think that continues to be an area of exploration. It's something I talk to a lot of founders about, how to kind of configure your offering so that you're able to sell on one of the cloud providers' marketplaces, and how do you make that happen so that you can expand your reach? Because essentially the cloud marketplaces are like an extended sales force, if you will, that gives you the reach, the visibility, and the exposure that you would probably not get on your own. If you're a fintech and you have maybe one or two sales or BD people or an account exec, this gives you the whole sort of sales force of all these cloud providers and gives you that access. The challenge is that many people in the cloud providers are not, financial technology or financial services experts. So you really have to kind of do an internal selling, and then you obviously have to sell to the end customer. And sometimes it's kind of coming through the customer who has an interest and then wants to purchase on the. And I don't know if that is too much detail for you, but
no, it's actually interesting. I'm also curious. How difficult it is to be listed at the marketplace? Like, how difficult is the process? So let's say I'm a founder of a new fintech startup, and I want to explore that avenue as a go-to-market strategy. How challenging would it be?
I mean, I think it depends on what you're trying to, to offer. I mean, certainly like a data provider, there's a whole data marketplace, and selling and managing your data, whether it's, direct or it's kind of based on your access and things like that, just like you do today if you're buying Bloomberg data from the terminal. The data motion, I think, is quote unquote easier, but sometimes it's more complex in terms of how to differentiate the quality of the data and kind of the data lineage and some of those really key aspects of data. So only buying a trading platform, is probably not going to happen.
Right.
So certainly if you're trying to offer something that's a very sort of a niche offering, I think you're going to have to do kind of more of a push strategy than a pull-through strategy. And I think that that's really that education that has to happen. And I think a lot of the cloud providers too, they get their sales teams get incentivized to offer those ISVs and to sell those ISVs. And to me, the real gap is having that industry expertise and knowing the problem that it solves, and being able to look at that architecture and that solution that's currently running and saying to the account team and to the salespeople, this is where it would be used. This is the problem that it solves, and this is kind of where I would recommend you create an entry point for this.
Let's explore more. I think I'm talking about this at every single episodes over the past few months. It's AI, obviously.
Yeah.
Let's explore the AI, machine learning technology. How can this be integrated into cloud-based FinTech ecosystem so that it enhances the capabilities like fraud detection, risk management, personalized finance services, and maybe we can cover a bit of ethical considerations.
Yeah, for sure. So the one thing that I always say to everybody when we're talking about capital markets or sort of the trading environment, whether it's wealth or pure sell side, as a former trader, even in the very early days, machine learning was being used. Obviously, all the algorithms, everything within Excel was being built and run. So it's a very comfortable place to be. So it's not really, I think it says not necessarily around the trading as much as, like I was talking about a little bit, the sentiment analysis. I think on the wealth management side, a lot of discussion is going into the personalization of the experience and how to really create a much more multi-layered and nuanced experience for the end user from a wealth perspective. And that includes educating about, buying, and investing. There's so many people who are not educated around that. They don't feel comfortable making those buying decisions. As you probably know, I don't know how many trillion off the top of my head, but it's like a huge wealth transfer that's happening today. So that is a real opportunity, I think, for AI, because then you can almost use, videos and almost gamification to help people understand how to purchase assets, whether it's, bonds, stocks, ETFs, whatever you're looking to buy. And I think that wealth space is going to continue to really explode with the use of AI. I also think it's going to help with onboarding. That's big risk for anybody coming onto a new platform, because the onboarding process in most cases is very cumbersome. It's very difficult to link your documents, link your all the documentation that's required from a regulatory standpoint. So I think that customer experience will become much better, and when that becomes much better, more people will sign up because it becomes easier and more doable and more accessible. I continue to think that the applications around asset management and portfolio management, so being able to do lots of analysis around your portfolio continues, with the asset managers, or they're going to continue to do that. Today, obviously there's a lot of sort of test cases running at some of the biggest asset managers. I think the one topic that needs to be talked about more, and the cloud providers don't like to hear this, but is a private cloud, because a lot of that data is PII data, and they don't want that data to be, obviously accessible. So many of, particularly the asset managers and the wealth managers, are going to have to create a private cloud environment where they do a lot of that analysis on the data, leveraging AI rather than kind of sending it any place or having it available in the cloud. And obviously we saw, the really exciting news about DeepSeek, but also, I don't know if you saw, but Wiz, the amazing security company that's based in Tel Aviv, they hacked their system like day one when it was launched. So I think, obviously financial services, they're going to continue, whether it's on the buy side in the asset managers or in wealth, or, obviously the trade. I think anybody who's in the sort of the high frequency trading, they're already pretty locked down about that. But I think that is going to be, that data privacy and security are going to continue to be really important topics. And when it comes to AI, even more so, how do they keep those models, potentially the small language models, trained in-house? How do they kind of work with them and use them? And how do they kind of protect the customers and obviously themselves?
Is this already happening, or are you talking more about what's going to happen this year mainly?
No, it's already happening.
It's already happening.
Yeah,
so the private cloud kind of trend is already there.
Yeah, a lot of the asset managers are very concerned about the data leakage, and they feel that they're not able to control it. So they're obviously thrilled to use AI models, and they're thrilled to use that across their portfolios. But these are not organizations different from the high frequency trading where they've invested so much in technology. These are, I think, a little bit, I wouldn't say that they were the earliest adopters of technology. And I think their concerns around privacy are very valid, and the privacy of their data, and obviously their algorithm, right? Because that's what they're trying to do, is to drive alpha, and they're not able to do that because somebody can get access to their algo or their portfolio modeling. That's going to obviously impact their credibility in the market, and obviously their ability to drive customers to purchasing their portfolio.
Is there out-of-the-shelf solution at Google to help host your data in-house and LLM in-house, to serve this kind of customers?
So not as far as I know, unless you create, obviously if you're using BigQuery or you're using, I would imagine that you could, put on provisions so that it was contained. But I don't know of an off-the-shelf way. I think, and I'm talking to a lot of the founders who are talking to these customers, particularly on the asset management and the wealth management side, who are kind of moving away from the public cloud to the private cloud.
Yeah, because the reason I'm asking, because I'm seeing that happening also,
really?
with the clients we work with.
Oh, wow.
Everybody wants to secure their data and go more in-house, store everything in-house, have LLMs hosted in-house.
Yeah.
But having that, you also facing different kind of limitations in terms of, suddenly you have to maintain your own LLM and all of that. So I was wondering if there is a solution that I'm not aware of.
Right. Several of the fintechs that I've been working with are doing that on behalf of their clients. So they're creating a way that they can maintain the small language and large language models, and they're creating sort of enclosed environment where they can access the GPUs, do all their testing, and everything kind of becomes a closed environment, and that this fintech is basically offering, if you will, I don't like to use that word, but a more out-of-the-box solution, so that asset managers can come and do that portfolio analysis in that building, but it's not sort of running on a public cloud that's open to everyone. And I'm seeing, several of those that are in that space and doing that. And these are the biggest U.S. Asset managers who are
because the demand is definitely there, especially as you mentioned with cases like DeepSeek, and there are concerns. Okay, sounds to be like it's a great LLM, but what's happening with our data, right? I don't know. Last time I read, I'm not sure if it's. I'm sure this is evolving. I'm just not following.
Yeah,
it's developing so fast.
It is.
That it could be, China state funded, company, and you never know what's going to happen with your data if you use it in commercial purposes, especially like your IP and stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of open, and it was not surprising because Wiz is that they're they like to hack. That's their
yeah.
And they were kind of right away when it came out, everybody's like, oh, this is the best thing, the world is going to change, and never Nvidia, the stock price went down what?
Yeah.
I don't know what percentage went down. I guess a buying opportunity, but Wiz is no, we're gonna get in there, and they went through and they showed exactly how they were able to hack and what protocols they used and how they developed, how they had insight into the breach and what they could do, and they had really detailed. They posted it like on a blog that, the same day. So not to say that what DeepSeek is doing is not interesting and doesn't have implications for the industry, and that there's a lot for everyone to learn from their approach.
Yeah.
Just, I think it, obviously, again, in financial services, I'm not saying any industry would want a security breach,
Yeah, they're open source to begin with, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge step in the whole
Right.
industry development. And
Yeah, I think that's also going to be continues to be big in financial services. I think there's going to be a lot more open source tech. Again, like a lot of the legacy providers are very, closed environments and require a lot of internal professional development to implement and maintain systems. The challenge is that a lot of those larger systems basically, require a whole army of people to maintain them and to continue to develop. Every time there's an upgrade, it's like, the world has to stop for the upgrade. I think a lot of, what you're starting to see with a lot of the, the digital assets providers, they creating their own systems that are flexible and dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there will be over time a big shift. And even some of the big institutions, if they're going to look at another product line, I think they're going to start looking at having a lot more agency over what they can build and own themselves, and not looking at a third party to do that. And going back to the data, if you look at a lot of the largest, trading houses, all that data is resident in that trading system. And if you don't have the right queries and calls to get that data and extract it, it's like it's a whole separate entity or role, frankly, to get that data, profile that data, and use it, because it has all the derivative data and all really complex trade history. And there's several of those platforms I can think of that it's a job unto itself just to extract and profile that data. And I think, these institutions are going to want to find other ways forward. I think it would be wise for them to find other ways forward.
You work at Accenture, now you're at Google. Can you share your observations in terms of key differences, how large consulting firms and tech giant like as Google are building fintech ecosystems?
Well, clearly, the thing that's so fantastic about Google are the engineers and sort of the product managers, and getting to really kind of learn a lot from them. And most of the people in those roles are really open to sharing with our partners and really educating them. I think in terms of being sort of if you will, boots on the ground, knowing the clients, the GSIs who focus on financial services, they've been inside these institutions for many years, and they've seen a very wide range of the challenges that they faced, and they have a very good sort of blueprint. Mm-hmm. And I think they have a lot of sort of 60,000 foot visibility on what's going on in these organizations. I think most of the cloud providers see things very much from a product perspective and see which products run and how those products run and how to deliver that product. So, if you're looking at from sort of the business perspective, it's more, obviously in the IT area that the big cloud providers play, and that's where they're really focused. Whereas I think in many cases the GSIs, they have big regulatory practices, compliance. They look at sort of that transformation from a different angle. Some of the GSIs have, they've all invested heavily in their partnerships with the cloud providers, and I think that continues to be a large source of their revenue and an opportunity to kind of do that joint go-to-market and really drive that change, particularly when it came to AI, because many of these organizations are at the C-suite, they're advising, the executives, and the executives want to turn to their trusted advisor. They're turning to those GSIs and saying, how do I use AI in my organization? What do you think the pilot program should look like? How do I train my staff? How do I make sure that people are getting upskilled in these very important areas? And I think a lot of the GSIs have a perspective on that, and they're sharing that perspective, with the institutions. The great thing about the cloud service providers is that they have a lot of on-demand training, and they have, certifications you can get and things like that. But I feel that that's very much focused on the developer community and a lot of people who are really into that that they get excited. So the founders I have that are the founder and CTO, those are the ones who kind of gravitate to that. And the founders I have that are, more commercial founders, they're looking at more kind of that advisory and how do they access that from an advisory perspective.
Talking about advisory, what was the toughest advice you ever had to give to technical FinTech startup founder, and what is his reaction or her reaction?
I mean, I think it's, again, I feel like this gets into a lot of layers, but all the cloud providers are very focused on their marketplace, and I think that marketplace is very much set up for a SaaS provider. I think the hardest conversations are with the founders are around enabling their application for a marketplace listing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not a SaaS provider, or you're offering a trading platform, or you're offering something that needs to be configured, even if it's cloud native and it's, sort of, again, out of the box is very relative. But at the same time, it's very difficult to, I guess, translate that into that marketplace environment when it's very developer focused, sort of like, you get a menu, you go in, you click, and you deploy that solution.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that kind of and I think that's the hardest thing to try to explain to founders, particularly if you're building an application or you're deploying something that is more complex. It's difficult to configure what you have in that environment. Google started doing something, I think about a year and a half ago, so they called it a private offer, so it's kind of like a one-to-one. So you run through a marketplace and you have some of the benefits of the marketplace, but you can make a one-to-one kind of deal. So it gets kind of like, it's a little bit like splitting the, so again, it's complicated for most people coming from the industry because they're used to a direct sale.
Yeah.
And they're, I think the hardest thing for them is to ask them to invest in building something that's bespoke for one specific cloud provider. I think those are the hard conversations, because if you're a small company and you have a finite amount of developers and a finite amount of money and time, you have to really see that return on investment and know that you're going to be able to drive revenue on that cloud provider, and that whatever your technical investment was gets returned.
Right. And I would imagine that those returns on investment are actually there, right? So that's activity actually worth it.
Oh yeah, they're definitely there. I mean, that's why they go there. I think again, I think a lot of founders underestimate how much effort that channel requires. So whether you choose a channel of a cloud provider, or you go through, working with a GSI or a system integrator, all those channels require an investment in, creating a narrative and a game plan and a cadence for meetings and a technical, enablement and training. There's a lot that goes into it. And I think people throw around that word, partnership a lot. And they're like, oh, we have a partnership. And that, but the reality is, in order to really do that force multiplier, which is what I think is really important about a partnership, everybody needs to invest and everybody needs to be in it together.
Let's wrap it up with an unexpected question.
Okay.
I didn't tell you about that question beforehand because
Okay.
it's a fun question. Imagine you're building a new venture, new startup, and you can invite to your team anyone from the industry, even from the history, like person that was long-time dad. Who would those people be and why? Sorry to put you on the spot.
It's okay. I'm just trying to think. If I were building a team, who would I have there? I'm so unprepared for this question.
I know. That's by design.
Team. I mean, I guess to me, what would be most important is to have somebody with, a really deep industry expertise. So I'm going to say the first woman who's had a seat on the New York Stock Exchange, that was Muriel Siebert. And she was the first, and for a long time, I think she was the only woman who had the seat on the stock exchange. So somebody who really knew the markets well, because I think there's a lot of speculation today, obviously, with Bitcoin and the future of blockchain.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. And I feel like we need more people who know the markets and know how to really create something that's market friendly. And who else would I have on the team? Lily Ledbetter have her come and join us. I guess anybody who is, I can think, a breakthrough innovator, I think would be important, because I think we need people who were able to see sort of the future before it happens, and who had kind of a moral compass and a lot of integrity in what they were delivering. I think we're still in, because of the rapid change and obviously the technological innovation that's happening, I think coupled with some of the challenges that we have today with the influence of big tech, I think seeing sort of a path forward with integrity remains, I think, a goal for all of us, to make sure that we're providing products and services that not only, wow the users and change the landscape, but also have integrity. I think that
So it's a combination of industry knowledge and innovation.
I would say, yes.
So for the listeners, whoever is planning to build a new company, look out for that.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's some leaders that are still alive today. Like, I have tremendous respect for Michael Bloomberg, and obviously, what he's built. And I think he's, withstood the test of time with a tremendous amount of, integrity in his product. You might not always be happy with how expensive it is to buy your data there and how it is, but somebody who's really stayed the course and only sort of doubled down his investment in kind of, delivering very high quality and not kind of moving away from that compass of what they set out to do. I think there's that many providers out there who can say that today.
Well, Alison, thank you very much for your time. It's been a great conversation. I enjoyed it a lot. For the listeners, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and see you in the next episodes.